The heart of civilized Europe harbors a little-known secret. One of the last herds of wild horses on Earth, free, untamed, and living by their instincts, as they have for millennia. It is an ancient life, ensconced in an ecosystem full of beauty and majesty, a hidden part of wild Europe that has survived through time. In the forest wetlands of northern Germany lies a unique sanctuary, home to the Dülmen horses. Shadows of a mighty past, the last wild horses that once roamed the swamps and forests of Central Europe in their thousands. This herd of 350 animals is robust and strong, with ancestors that survived centuries of harsh seasons and were never bred by humans. April marks the beginning of mating season. A stallion begins rustling the herd to chase mares. The stallion's goal is to round up a harem with as many mares as possible. At the same time, the more females he gathers, the more energy it takes to keep them together. And to add to the difficulties, another stallion has come to challenge him. First, each stallion tries to win the whole harem for himself. But neither is willing to back down. Equally matched in strength, the stallions finally split the herd into two groups. But in the end, it's the mares that have the final say about when is the right time. There is little rest for the stallion, especially given that the real work has yet to begin. At this time of year, the forests surrounding the herd blossom with life. These wet woodlands are home to more than 100 endangered species, but also to some exceedingly common ones. Wild boars are highly adaptable and have taken over many areas of Europe, both natural and urban. But these forest wetlands are their true native habitat. In early spring, most of the sows give birth. The piglets keep their striped fur until they're 4 months old. It's perfect camouflage for the dangerous woodlands. Some of the horses, too, have given birth after 11 months gestation. Mother boars band together and care for their piglets cooperatively. The little ones are quick to stretch their legs and start exploring. It isn't long before they can keep up with the group. At this time of year, the dolmen horses graze in the wooded areas. Grass is still sparse, and they come here to forage. This wilderness is a protected reserve. Here the horses live virtually unaffected by humans, feeding on wild vegetation, just as their ancestors did. Tree bark contains tanning acid, which keeps the horses free of worms. Despite the horses' size and heft, their stomachs are relatively small and they eat food low in nutrients. This means they have to spend most of their waking hours eating. In past centuries, vast swamps offered sanctuary where wild horses could escape predators and hunters. These wetlands once covered huge swathes of northern Germany. Now only a few remain. The smaller animals, like this bright blue moor frog, still find adequate space in the remaining swamps. April is their breeding season, the only time that the males don their bright blue color. From all directions, frogs gather in a mating pool for their yearly ritual. Once male and female meet, they literally take the plunge. During the mating season, hormones under the male's skin give him a blubbery look. But despite his flabby appearance, his grip on the female is inescapably strong. A single pair of moor frogs spawn more than 3,000 eggs to ensure that at least some survive. But these frogs need water to lay their eggs. Despite their prolific breeding, as the swamps disappear, so do the frogs. The European viper is a natural threat to the frog's survival. This snake, the only poisonous species in northern Europe, has also suffered as the wetlands have decreased. The snake's sensitive tongue has detected a different scent. Two males are fighting for a female. Instead of wasting their precious poison, they use brute force. The female waits to see who will win. Meanwhile, a third competitor has got wind of the fight. He throws himself into the melee, hoping for a chance at the prize. In the end, the winner is allowed to approach the female. The snakes mate in a firm embrace, the male gently caressing the female with its tongue. In the early morning hours, the dolmen horses are back in the meadow. The stallions are still competing with each other, but now only vocally. They have established the groups of females that each will mate with. The stallions check each mare to see if she's ready. He must approach with care. If he oversteps his bounds, he's put firmly in his place. The stallion knows by smell whether a mare is on heat. When he feels the time is right, he makes his move. After a few mishaps, the stallion finds a receptive mare. His Fleeman response helps him determine the mare's willingness to mate. His upper lip curls to trap pheromones inside his nasal cavity so that he can better detect whether mares nearby are ovulating. The mare willingly accepts his advances. Over the next few days, the stallion will mate with every mare on heat in his harem, so he has to keep moving. The Dulman horse's territory borders on farmland and sprawling fields. In some of these meadows, the rare curlew still breeds each spring. The curlew, with its doleful song, has also suffered from the dwindling of the European swamplands. The female and male take turns to sit on the nest, while the other searches for food. The chicks will hatch in a month's time. Curlews are nest-loyal birds. They always return to the same spot to lay their eggs. If their nesting place is destroyed, they cannot breed again. Over the centuries, the Dulman horses have become part of the ecosystem. A number of small creatures feed on their dung. They, in turn, become food for other animals. By the mid-19th century, the Dulman horses had been hunted almost to extinction, with only 20 animals left in all of Germany. The survivors fled into these swamp forests, where the landowner, the Duke of Croy, established a sanctuary and allowed them to gradually regain their numbers. May brings warm nights and a special moment for some creatures. The female May beetle can be spotted by her relatively small antennae. After having spent 4 years as underground grubs, the May beetles finally emerge as adults. Using its large antennae, the male immediately detects the scent of the female, which is already feeding in the tree. He picks up her trail without difficulty, thanks to the 50,000 tiny olfactory organs in his antennae. With their finely tuned senses, pairs are drawn together as if by magnets. They start mating immediately to make the new generation, which will only emerge 4 years from now. For the horses, nights are short. They spend 16 hours a day grazing. It's the beginning of May. Although a few mares are still expecting, most of the foals conceived last year have been born. The young horses mostly feed on milk, so the grazing hours leave them plenty of time for romping. Extremely curious, the foals will take an interest in just about anything. Most of all in each other, true to their nature as social animals. The foals start nibbling on grass, but they will only be weaned next spring when the mothers give birth again. In the meantime, there are plenty of ways to amuse themselves. In late June, the summer warmth has brought richness to the land. The farms around the horses' reserve have reached their peak. Although part of the local agriculture, blooming boundary ridges are home to animals as well. For the grain-loving harvest mice, it is a time of plenty. One of Europe's smallest rodents, the harvest mouse weighs only 10 grams. Its light weight makes it easy to scale the stalk and reach the coveted spike. The mouse's tail is particularly strong, allowing it to wind its way through almost any maze of stalks. Its lifespan is only around 18 months and is packed with activity day and night. These tiny mice lack the brawn to dig holes, so they construct nests high in the stalks, where the females raise their young. Boundary ridges provide tall, dense vegetation for the harvest mice to thrive in. But, like the nearby swamps, boundary ridges have become rare, and so too have the harvest mice. Unlike many other species, however, these mice can also live on farmland, a trait that bodes well for their future. The land of the Dulman horses is a mosaic of alternating fields and forests, which supports a diverse array of animals, including many endangered species. Among them is the eagle owl, arguably the largest owl on Earth. The adult owl has a wingspan of about 2 meters and weighs up to 3 kilograms, though the chicks start out weighing only a few grams. The shelter of a large root is the perfect spot for a nest, as eagle owls do not build in treetops. Under the careful watch of a parent, the chicks venture out to explore, on foot. The parents bring food for their young until they're about 5 months old and able to hunt for themselves. The eldest chick has his eye on the rat that his smaller sibling has been given. He is the biggest and already able to fly. He has no qualms about stealing, and the smaller one is in no position to argue. This way, the bigger and stronger chick constantly dominates. Each chick is a glimmer of hope for the species, which had long been missing from the woods. Once down to 60 pairs in Germany, eagle owls are beginning to regain their numbers. Today, the country boasts a breeding population of about 1,500 pairs. Other animals, like red deer, are less rare and have adapted well to the human impact on the landscape. Wild horses have nearly disappeared from Europe and the rest of the world. The American Mustang, or the horses of the Camargue in France, also live in more or less wild conditions, but are all descendants of domestic horses. The dolmen horses, on the other hand, are a wild herd that still roam their native land. While they may have interbred with domestic or feral horses at one time or another, they carry the unmistakable marks of wild heritage. Visible proof of their ancestry is the eel back, typical of the wild horses which once roamed the earth. Zebra-like markings on their legs are also telltale signs. The dolmen horse's sanctuary enjoys peace and security in a rural area with few human settlements. The remaining wetlands form small oases for many animals. One species has recently returned, after long being extinct from the region. The Eurasian otter. These large members of the marten family were once hunted for their velvety fur, and much of their habitat was destroyed. Thanks to its ultra-sensitive whiskers, the otter can hunt blind in the murky water. The otter's favorite prey is fish, but when the cold weather arrives, fish become scarce and the otter supplements its diet with anything from frogs and crustaceans to birds and small mammals. As streams and wetlands were restored in Germany and larger, meatier fish inhabited the waters, otters began to reconquer their original habitats. Sometimes it's a mystery how they do it. The nearest neighbors of these animals, for example, live more than 150 kilometers away. A big jump, even for an otter. Once the otter has staked out its territory, it makes sure to keep it well marked with urine. With its territorial nature, the otter depends on having enough habitat to establish its range. It needs contact with neighboring otters to mate once a year, though most of its days are spent alone. The highly social horses are just the opposite. They are always together for even the most basic of activities. The herd of 350 individuals is made up of many smaller family groups. Each is led by a matriarch, the oldest and most experienced mare. Looking out for the group, the matriarch tests the water to make sure it's safe. This behavior may stem from prehistoric times, when the waters were full of crocodiles and other hidden dangers. The curlew is used to the horses and not in the least afraid. Back in the nest, this year's brood has hatched. The curlew parents keep a very careful watch over their chicks. The tiny hatchlings are easy prey for foxes or other predators. For this reason, curlews normally breed in flooded areas. These days, however, wetlands are scarce, and a field will have to do. The last of the natural swamplands in the area reach their peak bloom in summertime. Some of their dazzling beauty can best be appreciated close up. While these sundews may appear harmless, there is more to them than meets the eye. With a sticky substance, the carnivorous flower lures thirsty insects and spiders. Once caught, there is no escape. The leaves close and the prey is trapped. Then the plant's special enzymes absorb and dissolve it. In this unique way, the sundews manage to survive, despite the scarce nutrients in the soil. The edge of the swamp by the heath is the haunt of the European viper. The males are long gone. The female remains behind, awaiting a big event. In a warm, quiet spot, she gives birth. The European viper is one of the few reptiles that actually gives birth to live young. This snake's young develop inside eggs while in utero and hatch inside the mother just before they're born. Typically, vipers have between 5 and 15 young. This ability to incubate eggs inside the womb means the European viper can live even in cold regions like Scandinavia. The eggs are kept warm inside the mother's body. As soon as they're born, the young snakes set about shedding their first skin, a process they repeat several times as they mature. The newborn vipers are not cared for by the mother. They must venture out and fend for themselves. It's October. Autumn has arrived. The cool air and fog cause changes in the landscape. Horses are well equipped to weather all seasons in the wild. The Dolman horses suffered great losses at the hands of humans, but their ability to survive in the wilderness remains intact. Along with physical characteristics, the Dolman horses have inherited many instincts and behaviors from their ancestors. First and foremost, perhaps, is their curiosity. This ball of spikes is an object of wonder. When confronted with it, the horses follow their noses. The horses are both inquisitive and cautious, and sometimes a conflicting mixture of the two. As the temperature drops ever lower, the hedgehog senses it is time to look for a good spot to hibernate. While some animals store their food to eat during the winter, the hedgehog has to pack in as many calories as it can before hibernation. It's vital to get as fat as possible before its months of fasting. Hidden under a sturdy root, it'll sleep away the cold winter days until spring returns. The red squirrel, meanwhile, is busy stocking his larder. These squirrels shed their coats twice a year, a thinner summer coat and a thicker, darker coat with larger ear tufts in winter. The squirrel jumps at the opportunity to add to its food stores. One of the fastest ways to get food is to steal from others. And the thief has a storage area ready. At first, the victim seems unconcerned. But while squirrels may overlook a robbery or two, sharing is not so popular. Luckily, there's plenty to go round. The squirrels make their nest, or dray, out of branches and leaves. They will stay active throughout the season, but need somewhere warm to hunker down in the cold. The horses, too, have to fatten up in the time of plenty, enough to last through the cold season. Soon the grass will become sparse. Dolman horses still live by natural selection. As the challenge of the cold approaches, some members of the herd fall by the wayside. In the wild, when a foal is ill, it either heals on its own or not at all. One of the secrets of the survival of these rare horses is that only strong, healthy animals pass their genes on to the next generation. The mother watches over her dying foal, but there is nothing she can do. She can only accept nature's way. October brings a symphony to the cool twilight air. Thousands of cranes pass through on their way south. At dusk, they settle in the swamps to spend the night. Some take advantage of the last rays of light to forage for corn kernels strewn in the field. The cranes need all the energy they can store for their long, exhausting flight. This family of 3 stick close together. The single chick stays with its parents, even when nearly adult. Then, from one moment to the next, winter descends on the moorland. For the grass-loving Dulman horses, this is a season of hardship. Foals still drink their mother's milk, which sustains them during the cold months. The horses' thick winter coat protects them against the chill, but they also find warmth by huddling together, seeking shelter among the trees. Even here, there is only sparse, dry grass to be found. But the winter is no match for the Dulman horses, which are exceedingly tough. For centuries, they have adapted to the landscape and its climate. Instinctively, they make their way to the best places to find food. The winter is not hard on all the animals. The eagle owl's prey are weakened and easily spotted. One of these rabbits will feed him for a couple of days. The horses are weathering the winter well. There's even enough energy for a dispute here and there. Hierarchy is often a source of conflict among the mares. The horses' close social bonds provide safety in numbers. Though all their predators are now extinct, this herd mentality was a vital trait in centuries past. Many eyes see more. While a single horse is easy prey, a group is a challenge to attack. In winter, even quenching thirst can be a problem. Up to now, the ice has been thin and melts easily when breathed on. Later, the horses will use their hooves to crack it. Long, cold winters are a rarity in northern Germany, but this year snow has covered the land for many weeks. The horses endure as long as possible. But sometimes the vegetation is simply too scarce. The sanctuary is not as large as horses' natural territory and does not always provide enough grazing land to see the horses through the winter. As deadly as humans once were to wild horses, they now help them survive. The Dülmen Horses Reserve is surrounded by idyllic German countryside. While its boundaries limit the horses' range, it also means that the herd can be provided for and protected. These horses were first documented by humans nearly 800 years ago, but their lineage goes back tens of thousands of years. Had the horses' benefactor, the Duke of Croy, not had the foresight to protect them, the wild horses would have become part of European folklore. We would never have known their wild existence. But the Dülmen horses have been spared the darkness of extinction. After nightfall, they protect themselves by gathering as a group. The jackdaws do the same. Every evening they form a flock to sleep together at common roosting spots. Their nights, however, are fraught with indecision. No sooner do they settle on one place than they have a change of heart. After half an hour of vacillation, the jackdaws are finally ready to tuck in for the night. When spring returns in early March, green spreads rapidly across the countryside. But the landscape is not the only sign of springtime. Under cover of darkness in early March, the first foal of the year is born. In these first moments, mother and foal memorize each other's scent. The entire family group gathers around newborn and mother, offering protection and support. The foal's hooves are soft to facilitate the birth, but quickly harden. The greatest challenge in life for a Dülmen horse today may be the struggle to stand up. Foals suckle standing up, so getting to its feet also means its first meal. It's exhausting work, which warrants a break now and then. The mother feels a sense of urgency. The newborn is totally vulnerable, and instinct tells them both that it must gain mobility soon. About an hour later, the morning is well underway, and the foal is on its feet. Instinctively, the foal searches for the udder. The first few drops of milk are precious and extremely rich in nutrients. Female foals stay with their family group for life. But young stallions have quite a different road ahead of them. Once a year, on the last Saturday in May, thousands of visitors come to the land of the Dülmen horses for a big event. Today, the last wild horses of Europe are being chased again. Young men from the region corral small groups. When they catch a glimpse of a one-year-old stallion, they try to catch it with their bare hands. This method is gentler for the horse than lassoing it. But it's a daunting task, to say the least. Once the halter is buckled, the stallion's freedom is over. If all the stallions stayed in the herd, there would be no end of fighting. On their protected land, they cannot migrate in search of mares, as they would in the wild. The stallions are branded with the Von Croy coat of arms and sold. Thanks to their gentle character, the Dülmen horses are coveted as riding or coach horses. The rest of the herd is released again, until next year. The event and the sale of the stallions helps to maintain the sanctuary and secure the well-being of the herd. Thus, humans who once drove wild horses to the edge of extinction have found a way to ensure their future. Europe's last wild horses can continue to roam. Shadows of a bygone era, but also survivors, full of strength and resilience. The Dülmen horses have preserved a way of life for many years to come.